A lot of people say that Shane Beamer is corny, but he's actually a lot more savvy than people give him credit for.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, your show for the latest headlines and potential storylines on South Carolina Gamecock athletics. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and also a staff writer for Gamecocks Digest over on SI.com. Thank you for making Locked On Gamecocks your first watch or listen here today. We are free and available on YouTube and also wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. The transfer portal has become a main fixture of the offseason in college football. Obviously, there's a lot of debates that are going on regarding just how much you should utilize the transfer portal. You've got some people like Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney who believes in rarely ever using the transfer portal and basically getting all of your players from the high school ranks. You've got other people like Deion Sanders who are going to new programs and essentially trying to start over completely with their roster by getting almost all of their players from the transfer portal ranks. And Shane Beamer very recently gave his own comments regarding the transfer portal and more particularly how a transfer portal recruitment unfolded. And those comments showed how savvy Shane Beamer can be in using the media to send messages to players and recruits. Now, in regards to the comments I'm referring to, Shane Beamer made a stop on his welcome home tour in Charlotte, North Carolina on Wednesday afternoon. And there were a couple of media members from the Gamecock beat that went up there and happened to catch Shane Beamer for a couple of minutes. And Shane Beamer was asked by some of these media members about transfer portal recruiting and some of the traits that he looks for in guys, which mainly revolves around the cultural fit. And Shane Beamer went on about this for a minute or so, and it eventually led to this interesting quote that Colin Taylor from Gamecock Central managed to get from Shane Beamer, which was this, quote, "I want to make sure that they want to work and they're coming here for the right reasons and want to compete. We had a young man want us to promise him a starting spot last night, meaning Tuesday night, and we wouldn't," Beamer said. "So he's going to another SEC school. I wish him well. I'm not into promising roster spots or starting jobs. We're into competing." Now, I'm not obviously going to try to delve into who the particular recruit might have been that he was talking about here, but what I think needs to be the main takeaway from this quote is there is a variety of ways in which Shane Beamer was savvy with how he delivered this quote and the hidden message behind it in particular. First of all, this quote sends a message to his current players and prospective recruits in future recruiting classes. The message is that Shane Beamer talks the talk, but also walks the walk when it comes to his expectations for his football players in his program. This validates the genuine and honest personality that everybody can see with Shane Beamer when they have interactions with him. And therefore, this earns more trust from the players. Because obviously, if you don't have the trust of the players, then you're not going to be able to build off of much of anything with your football team in that season or really for the future of your program. And when it comes to high school football recruits, parents who are heavily involved in these recruitments are going to love these comments from Shane Beamer because obviously, again, it shows that Shane Beamer doesn't talk out of both sides of his mouth, that he has a consistent and constant message that he delivers, one that he believes in, and he's not trying to put up some sort of facade with their son. So parents are going to love that for obvious reasons. But the other thing is, this message conveys to prospective recruits in the future that Shane Beamer and his staff, they're obviously going to treat these kids like they are one of their own. They're going to treat them like human beings. They're going to love on them at the end of the day. But at the same time, they're also going to hold these guys accountable. They're going to make sure that they understand that they are responsible for their own actions, that they're responsible for their play on the football field, and subsequently how they go about their day off of the field. Parents will love that as well, especially if they feel like that maybe their kid needs to go to a school that is going to keep them in check when it comes to the accountability factor there. Here's the other thing. This quote from Shane Beamer sends a message to any players, obviously, who have entered the transfer portal already, or maybe guys that could enter the portal in the future and have kept a close eye on South Carolina's football program. And that message overall is that South Carolina isn't going to just hand you anything that you want. If you're there mainly for your own personal goals and you do not have the team's overall goals in mind when you come to play at South Carolina, then you're wasting your time, honestly, trying to get to Columbia. And this quote will also have a reverse effect on transfer players who maybe go into the portal, but still are made up of some of the old school ilk of this sport, in the sense that they want to be pushed by their coaches. They do not want to be just handed a starting job. They want to be able to come here and earn that. And I know that there's some people that like to generalize and say that every player that's going to the transfer portal is going in there for their own reasons and they're scared of competition. I think that is a very far-fetched idea. I certainly don't believe that that's the case with every single player that's out there in the transfer portal. And for those players who do want competition, who do want their coaches to be on them every single day and try to become a better football player, and obviously a better brother, a better son off of the field as well, they're going to love this stuff from Shane Beamer. And these kind of messages with the quote that I mentioned earlier helps to explain why this time around you haven't really heard South Carolina mentioned as much with a lot of the top portal players to this point. And I'm talking about the first transfer portal window, obviously not including a guy like Trey Knox, and this current transfer portal window that just ended this past weekend, but is still kind of ongoing because there's a lot of players out there that have yet to commit to a specific program. And I gotta be honest, y'all, when you think about it, with all the portal defections that this team had during the offseason before the Gator Bowl and some of the defections they had after the Gator Bowl, I think that's only hardened Shane Beamer's stance on which guys his staff is going to pursue. If they, again, feel like that you're somebody that's just trying to use South Carolina as a stepping stone overall, which, I mean, every prospect in the portal is going to do that to at least a certain degree, right? That makes sense. But if you are coming here and none of your goals surround the betterment of the program itself, then they're not going to go after you, especially if they get those kind of vibes from you. And I think that that's very important to take into account when Shane Beamer and the staff attacks the portal in the future. Now, when it comes to Shane Beamer's staff, I think that there was another quote that he gave on Wednesday afternoon that can help give us a good idea of what he wants his environment in the building to look like and how it's reminiscent of what his father, College Football Hall of Famer Frank Beamer, did during his time at Virginia Tech. And I'm going to dive into what all that means in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Okay, y'all have heard me talk about Built Bar a ton on this show. You know that I love Built Bar. You know that I have tried Built Bar before. And at this point, I don't really know what y'all are waiting for if you're looking for a new protein bar to have in your snack cabinet. Built Bar literally checks off all of the boxes. First of all, it's got 100% real, genuine chocolate that covers the entire contents inside of the bar. The protein bar is only 130 calories. It's only got 4 grams of sugar, and it still gives you a whopping 17 grams of protein. They've got a ton of flavors to choose from. They've got banana cream pie. They've got cookie dough chunk puffs. They've got coconut puffs. They've got so many things that most companies would never offer you. And the other thing is, you can get these bars both online at built.com, or you can find these bars at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. At Walmart, you'll find these bars in the pharmacy section where you can grab a 4-bar box. At Sam's Club, you can grab yourself a 13-bar box, which will include select flavors. I promise you, you're going to thank me later once you try Built for the first time or for the next time there afterwards, because Built Bar is where tasty is the new healthy. Welcome back to this Friday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. Be sure to stick around to the end of the show, and you'll hear my 3 keys to the Gamecocks winning this upcoming weekend's baseball series against the Kentucky Wildcats on the road in Lexington. But before we get to that, let's talk about another quote that Shane Beamer gave on Wednesday afternoon that, in my opinion, gives credence to the kind of environment that he wants for his coaching staff and connects to what his father did at Virginia Tech. So, regarding the quote that Shane Beamer gave, this is what he said, quote, "I've seen the culture at different places get out of whack, pro and college, by not having the right people in your program. I want to bring in the right person into the program." Now, I'm not going to try to sit here and say that Shane Beamer was trying to send some massive, broad message with this specific quote. But again, I do think this provides insight into the kind of environment that Shane Beamer wants, which is this. Shane Beamer wants a good culture that leads to coaches wanting to come here just like high school football recruits, which in turn can lead to long-term continuity and your program becoming a spitting image of stability in college football. Heading into year 3, Shane Beamer still has 6 assistants from his inaugural staff still currently in the program. And the other thing is, Shane Beamer has yet to fire a single coach. You might be wondering why I'm bringing that up. Well, here is why. Shane Beamer, in my opinion, has gotten this idea of coaching continuity and creating a positive family environment from his father, Frank Beamer, and how he established Virginia Tech as a national power. And that was evidenced by how long some of his assistant coaches stuck with him. The best example being Bud Foster, who became a legendary defensive coordinator for the Hokies and was on Frank Beamer's staff for his entire career in Blacksburg, which was 29 years for Frank Beamer. Think about just how rare that is these days. And I'm not going to sit here and say Shane Beamer is trying to recreate that exact situation, because honestly, you'll never see something like that happen again in college football, because today's college football is much different than the one that Frank Beamer got involved in as a major Power 5 head coach all the way back in 1987. Because these days you got social media presence that is now more important than ever before. You got recruiting that is going on 2, 3, 4 years ahead of time of when kids are actually going to sign their national letter of intent. You have got money that is now a bigger factor in recruiting. You've also got the transfer portal that you have got to deal with. So you've got to worry about your current players potentially listening to other programs. Maybe one day coming up to you and saying, you know something, I don't completely like my current situation here. I think I'm going to actually walk out the door and enter into the transfer portal. That is a lot of stress-inducing responsibilities that this job now is putting on current-day coaches. And what is this leading into? Well, we're seeing now that less coaches are wanting to stick around in the college ranks. Matt Luke went to the Georgia Bulldogs football program, was living comfortably off the money that he got from his Ole Miss buyout, and spent 1 or 2 years with the Bulldogs before he stepped away from the game altogether. And he cited wanting to spend time with family as a big reason for that. And here's the thing, this is just beginning. You're going to see more coaches potentially do this in the next few years. And subsequently, you're going to see more coaches that want to be in a healthy work environment where they can have some semblance of balance in their life. And here's the thing, Shane Beamer, with what he's done up to this point, is working very, very hard to offer that to assistant coaches who come and work for him at South Carolina. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that Shane Beamer won't ever have to fire a coach. I'm sure that one day that is going to eventually come for South Carolina's head man. It doesn't mean that he won't make adjustments when needed, that he will stay stuck in his ways. But Shane Beamer understands that while the program obviously needs great players in order to see this team go to heights that have never been seen before, he also needs great coaches. You need to make sure that your building is not just a constant revolving door if you're South Carolina. If you're a program like an Alabama or Georgia, you can get away with cycling through assistant coaches constantly because they've built a championship pedigree in those buildings. They have that reputation to fall back on, which is going to inherently draw interest from dozens and dozens of assistant college football coaches. Something that South Carolina is currently striving to reach at some point. So, my overall point here is that these comments that Shane Beamer mentioned earlier regarding he wants to bring in the right people to his program because he has seen how bad cultures can cause problems in other buildings at both the college ranks and in the NFL. There's going to be other coaches that are going to hear that, they're going to read that, and they're going to sit there and they're going to say, you know something, this guy gets it. This guy understands what this industry, what this business is like. I like the stuff he's made of, and you know something, if he's ever got a job that opens up, I just may want to go work for him. I can promise you, there's plenty of coaches out there who have already had that thought about Shane Beamer. And that is a good thing. Because obviously, South Carolina will not just keep all these assistants here forever. Dowell Loggains, I'm sure, has a long-term goal of eventually making it back to the NFL, repairing his reputation in the college ranks. I'm sure that eventually Torian Gray might get a co-defensive coordinator role. I mean, he has done wonders with South Carolina secondary. It's only a matter of time before either you got to change his title at South Carolina to keep him here, or there's going to be another program that will offer him that title and such a sizable pay bump that maybe he just doesn't feel like he can stick around, that he has to go and take that job. Pete Lembo, South Carolina's star special teams coordinator, he is going to eventually become a head coach once again, probably at the group of 5 level. And you know something? As of right now, he absolutely deserves every bit of another opportunity. So, Shane Beamer knows that change will come eventually, whether he is prepared for it or ready for it or not. And so you need to have a good image, a good reputation within the coaching fraternity of how your program looks, but also how it operates on the inside, especially regarding how it functions when other people are not watching. And so far, he is acing that test. And South Carolina is going to reap the benefits of that long term as long as they can continue to keep things going in the right direction on and off the field. All right, now before I get into South Carolina's 3 keys to winning their baseball series this upcoming weekend against the Kentucky Wildcats, I want to thank all of the everydayers for watching the Locked On Gamecocks podcast on YouTube or listening to us wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. If you want to become an everydayer, feel free to subscribe and click the bell on YouTube or give us a follow wherever you get your audio podcasts. All right, now let's get into a pivotal road series here for Mark Kingston's squad as they travel to Lexington to take on a Kentucky Wildcats team that is much improved from this past season. And obviously, South Carolina, as we have seen over the past several weeks, have been dealing with significant injury issues in the infield, getting very thin in terms of their depth and having to go to lineups that were unforeseen, quite frankly, at the start of this season. Now, that obviously does not mean that South Carolina cannot come out of Lexington with a series victory. So what do they have to do? Well, let's jump into the three keys here. Starting off with South Carolina's pitchers need to attack the strike zone. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done because you need to make sure that your guys have good command of their pitches. But for South Carolina, they're going to have a good opportunity this weekend to face off against an SEC team that, in a rare moment, does not possess a lot of collective power in their batting lineup. Kentucky as a squad has only hit 28 home runs all season, and Hunter Gilliam, one of their starters, is the only Wildcat with more than 4 homers this season, as he has hit 8 to this point. The Wildcats are also a team, however, that has stolen a lot of bases, as on 92 attempts, Kentucky has stolen 70 base paths, with 3 of their players having 11 or more stolen bases. So this is clearly a team in Kentucky that lives and dies by the small ball approach, meaning that they are not afraid to go base pad to base pad or station to station, however you want to term it, and score runs, maybe one by one. Think of it like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And South Carolina's pitching staff, obviously, they're coming off a series where they got absolutely demolished by Auburn's batting lineup, which can sometimes hurt your confidence a little bit. So, bottom line, South Carolina's pitching staff, you need to attack the strike zone this weekend. Even if you give up some hits, that's fine. Trust the guys behind you to make plays and force Kentucky to earn their runs this weekend. That's the first key to winning this series. The second key, going to the other side. South Carolina's hitting lineup needs to have patience at the plate. Again, I know easier said than done, but there's a reason I bring this up. Kentucky's pitching staff, as a whole, has a strikeout to walk ratio of 2.01. Now, to put this in layman's terms, that is not very good. That basically means that for every 2 strikeouts a Kentucky pitcher is getting, they are giving up a free pass to an opposing batter. And for South Carolina, they've been one of the best teams in the country this year in terms of drawing walks, especially in SEC play. And this leads me into my final key for a series victory this weekend, which is capitalize on the opportunities that you have at the plate when you get them. South Carolina, in the Auburn series this past weekend, left over 30 base runners on the base paths, which again, not very good. In layman's terms, essentially, South Carolina, they had opportunities, especially in game 1, from what I can recall. I believe at least 12 base runners were left on base in that specific contest, but South Carolina could not bring them home. And with how many injuries that this lineup is dealing with right now, and the fact that Gavin Casas and Ethan Petrie, there are a couple guys that have played a lot of games this year, you've got to worry about, this team, again, pressing too hard here, especially being on the road in an environment that I wouldn't say is one of the more hostile environments in the conference, but again, Kentucky's got a good baseball team this year, and they're facing the number 3 team in the country in their own home ballpark. Their fans are going to show up. They're going to be loud. And so for South Carolina, you cannot let the moment be too big for you, especially for the guys that maybe otherwise would not be in the lineup right now. So no matter how you do it, capitalize on opportunities when you have runners on base, runners in scoring position. Don't be afraid to get aggressive when those opportunities arise. If South Carolina can accomplish all 3 of these things, then they should win this series in Lexington, Kentucky. Kentucky, again, they're an improved program. I think they've done a very good job this year, and they have been quite competitive even in some of the series losses that they've suffered. But South Carolina, you are still the better team. You should win this series. But life on the road in the SEC is a difficult one, especially when it comes to baseball, a sport that can be so fickle in multiple moments. So, going to be a fun one to watch this weekend between the Gamecocks and the Wildcats. But with that being said, that does it for today's show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope that y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show. As always, what are your thoughts on Shane Beamer's comments regarding his transfer portal recruiting, the specific recruitment that he brought up, and the message that it conveys with how he goes about, again, talking the talk while also walking the walk with his current players, recruits, and also coaches? Let me know about that and your thoughts on South Carolina's baseball series against Kentucky down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube. Or if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast hit me up on Twitter at @aline_SC. Would love to get your thoughts either way on both of those topics. And once again, thank y'all so much for making us your first watch or listen here today. Really and truthfully appreciate all of the support that y'all give us. Have a great rest of your Friday and a fantastic weekend. And I will catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.